As soon as the word psychology come in, it's about mad people. And it's not about that. It's the behavior of people, studying the behavior of people. And that's the value add where we can take hands and say, how do we mesh this? Because security is also studying people. It's also watching people and make a conclusion.
Welcome to the Circuit Magazine, the #1 source of information on protection matters, the industry-leading magazine for all security professionals who want to stay ahead of the game.
Industrial psychology for security. Today, we are going to be talking with Nico and Nicolene Schutte, both industrial psychologists from the University of Johannesburg and big links to the EP industry out in South Africa, notably the TSU organization. We're going to be talking about how this applies to executive protection. John Moss and myself, very intrigued about this topic. So, John, why should our EP community get excited?
Palom, I have no idea what we're talking about today. I mean, I don't fully understand where this fits in to the broader security industry, or whether it is more of a individual's responsibility or something we should care about. So what's your, like, when you brought this topic to us, what's your thinking? Because I think you've got a better starting point.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And that might be the same attitude for many listeners. What this is designed to help with is to prevent employee turnover. It's designed to improve employee management. It's improving well-being and due diligence for your staff, but also getting under their skin to work out what makes them tick, what's going to help them work better. It's more than just doing lackluster interviews with them or exit interviews if they've disappeared from your organization. It's much more about working out how remuneration or compensation or anything of that matter could or could not motivate them. Because it could be the highest paid role in the market. But if you know that they are going to feel unbelievably stressed, they will not take the work and you will be left without any operators. We're looking at how to properly train them and evaluate them. And we talk a lot on this podcast about upskilling. And yes, that's a nice word, but how do we know that they got cognition? How do we know that they got the skill that we sent them off to learn? And how do we know that, in fact, that is a crucial part of their career? So we're applying organizational psychology to EP with two South African colleagues who have been instrumental, at least in my very first conference way back in 2016, the CP Tech Forum, and we're going to get their take on why EP can stand to benefit a lot from this.
Okay, that's great. So definitely, if I'm an employer, a hiring manager, somebody in the corporate structure, I can now see the importance of that. You've got my attention. But as a self-employed protector, how is this relevant to me, and what will I be looking for in the episode? What will I want to get out of this?
So probably two things. One for the immediate, years and months to come, which is how do I speak that corporate language? How do I get them to understand my needs and make sure that I don't just drop off the radar? How do I get that professionalization down? How do I highlight the different skill sets that I need to, progress? And how do I communicate that to a potential employer? But then if you think about it, one of the very, very usual career paths is to start to employ people yourself. And it's really key to see how that is done. It's not just HR mumbo jumbo. It's actual and it's an actual workplace management strategy that looks at how to get under the skin of your employees to see, what motivates them. The other application, and this is just an added benefit, is to see how your adversaries are motivated. That is more psychology than organizational psychology, admittedly, but some of the same principles apply. Just as when I think we had another segment on fixated individuals, imagine that someone comes up and says, the movie star that you're protecting, I'm going to marry them next week. The very worst thing psychologically to say to them is, no, you're not, shut them down, and then, accost them. The better answer is, oh, really? When? These better questions, these more engaging questions, get a lot more information for your day-to-day operations. So either for your immediate work to get people to understand where you're coming from and make your life a bit better, or when you're going to employ people in the near or longer term future.
Okay, so I'm going to be smarter by the end of this podcast.
Well, maybe. I mean, that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm trying to get, because quite often with these sessions, we bring in an outside expert and say, how does this apply to EP? But with Nico, having come from a family in EP in South Africa, the place that a lot of people go for their EP training, I believe this will be a great fit.
Okay, well, I'm primed and ready to get stuck into this.
Fantastic. Well, let's meet Nico and Nicolene Schutte on the topic of industrial organizational psychology for the security world.
And now, let's meet one of the contributors to the Circuit magazine.
Understanding the psychology behind security talent management. Today, John Moss and myself are delighted to welcome Nico and Nicolene Schutte, industrial psychologists with Johannesburg University, with a keen interest in the psychological side of the talent industry within security. It's a great pleasure to have you on, both of you. How are you doing?
Thank you, Pelham, and thank you, John. I think it's great seeing you again and talking to you. We're doing wonderful here in South Africa. We thought it's going to be a sunny day, but it's rainy like London, so we're good to go.
Love it. And what about you, Nicolene?
Good afternoon, and it's wonderful connecting with you again. And I like this whole thing of technology, bringing us together and also sharing some thoughts on a very important topic this afternoon. So we want to thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And like Nico rightfully said, I think it feels like we're sitting in England. It's raining. But nevertheless, like for us, our hearts are warm about this topic, and we're very excited to contribute this afternoon.
Very good. So let's jump in. This topic, the psychology of talent management within security. What is the problem you are trying to solve?
I think first and foremost, Pelham, I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about and where we come from, it's all about the security mindset. Is to talk about what is the paradigm when we talk about security and what is the mindset worldwide about when we talk about and I've been, like I said previously, engaging with you on your in London, is when you talk about security in London, is it standardized when you talk in South Africa? If people talk about a security guard or, like you said, an executive protection guard, what do they see? What do they think about it? How do people perceive themselves when they take on that uniform? Do they see themselves and perceive themselves as professionals? Do they think they possess a professional set of competencies? How do they view themselves? And then how does the world view them? How does the people out there view them and their conduct? How do they operate when they do their job? So there's a huge thing when it comes to talent and talent management, and it's all with regards to professionalization and standardization. To say, okay, if I talk about American security industry, vis-a-vis talk about the UK, you talk about South African. What do we talk? Do we talk about a different blend of people? Do we talk about the same people? How do they think about them? And why is there difference in the nuances and the thinking about? So that's what we normally talk about, Pelham.
And Nicolene, I'd be interested, why is that important?
Yeah. And thank you very much for the question, Pelham. So we've done a lot of work on talent management in South Africa, and we also work with quite a lot of people globally. And there's a massive gap in terms of the talent management itself within the security industry. Now, let's be honest with one another. The nature and the type, like of security threats that we are facing, like currently, not only South Africa, but also on a global scale, is changing so rapidly. They actually, in fact, it's like I don't want to call it criminals, but they're becoming more professional, like they're becoming more clever with what they are doing. And we really need people to be skilled and competent to address all the different areas related to security. So what's important for me is that for example, kidnapping has now been identified as an official crime within South Africa. And we really need people, and we've got a drastic shortage of people who can really tap into that area. And I don't even speak of globally. So what is very important is that we really start looking, like Nico rightfully said, security should become a profession. It should become really a respected profession. It's not only about being a security guard, but it's really a person, with this acumen, and those unique gifts you can act really, in any given situation. So I think what's very important is that where I see the future going is that there's going to be a growth in terms of careers within the security space. But we need to start becoming more proactive, and really tap into those skill sets, and into those mindsets, and really start preparing people, for those avenues. So I think it's really critical, that we start focusing on that.
Okay, and then relating it directly to EP, Nico, I know I first met you in our first Close Protection Technology Forum in London, but for those of you in the audience that don't know you both, where's your background? Where does your passion for this come from vis-a-vis executive protection specifically?
No, thanks, Padam. Good question. I think that is very important. I'm not been in psychology or industrial psychology my life. My life started as a young policeman. So I started in the ranks at military training, paramilitary training. So the passion for security is always there. So I've been in the ranks, been a senior, left the police in 1997 as a lieutenant colonel, as a senior officer, been through everything, SWAT training, all those things. Did my duty. So the passion for that and understanding that background, understanding where it comes from, and also understanding that there's areas of expertise, and the skill set is totally different. But my question was always, how does the community perceive us as policemen? And also, how does the industry itself perceive itself as an industry? If when it comes to professional, when we talk about a doctor, when we talk about a psychologist, there's certain criteria. I mean, if I say that you, like Nicolene rightly said, if I want to become a policeman, there were certain criteria. I couldn't go to become a policeman. Then if I want to, when I went through the ranks, there's certain criteria. My question always was, what is our criteria, and why is it only that I can take anybody to become a security guard or whatever? So, and why is it not standardized, So those are the questions that I always work with, Pelham.
Okay, and what about you, Nicolene? Where does your passion for this come from? Have you made a segue into the world of security? Have you always been involved?
Pelham, thank you very much for that question. Well, as you know, I'm married into a whole family of security and those with a police background. And my real interest, in talent management and security came when I met Nico a couple of years ago, but also his late brother, Mornay. And when they start talking to me about, what security is about, and then I said, wow, there is really a niche area, and a scarce skill that we need to tap in. So where I come from is that I'm currently a leading author in terms of talent management, and the professor and the director of the Center for Work Performance. And I also call myself a pracademic. So what's important for me is that we've got the responsibility of educating people out there, on what are the future skill requirements for people, and also giving them that acumen. But something important, Pelham, is that what I'm starting is that I'm busy working on a community project, and I call it #BeTalentSafe. And the reason for that is I really want to create a space, we can become more security savvy, become more security aware, within communities, but on the other hand, also train people and and educate them, to become really professional again, within that security space. So I'm quite passionate about that, Pelham, and that the reason for that is really because I see my part of my work is really to predict the future needed skills, not only within South Africa, but also globally. And that is really a field that's going to grow very rapidly.
And that should be, music to a lot of the listeners' ears. A lot of people for a long time have been talking about professionalization of the industry, elevating the status, and of course standards and things are actually a very hot button topic. But my final quickfire question before I hand over to John is literally, what should the uninitiated EP practitioner better understand about industrial psychology? It doesn't seem to be a natural thing for them to look at. What should they better understand about the discipline?
I think from my side, first and foremost, I think something that people don't understand is the cause and effect. Everything has a cause and effect. And one of the things that as policemen is that, we tough, we don't cry, we don't show emotions. And I think that's something that we need to understand. Although it's a tough environment, we still deal with emotions. And if you can better deal with your emotions, and that's where we come on to understand those emotions. If people understand, okay, I'm in a tough world, but that doesn't mean I have to be tough with regard to my emotions. How do I deal with tough situations when I get into contact? How do I deal with this? Because it seems that you're a failure if you talk to psychologists, but it's just a basic understanding of emotions. How do I deal with my emotions? How do I deal with tough situations? Because remember, most of these people are married people. They're in situations where there's relationships. How do I deal with tough relationships? All those things where the psychology comes in, where we can add value to give them a basic understanding of the world around us. How do I deal with people? How do I deal with teams? How do I deal with all this? That's a psychology what comes to mind, just as a quick burner film.
And would you concur, Nicolene? I mean, if I'm an EP operator and I'm not a director and I'm not managing a team, should I worry about industrial psychology?
Yes, Pelham, definitely. Because remember, and what Nico rightfully said, with us as industrial psychologists, we really equip you, with skills. You need to be able to read situations. You need to be able, to see, okay, this is the type of person, or between brackets, criminal, or trespasser that I'm dealing with. So how can I best, behave and act, in this given situation, to try prevent, or mitigate, even a further conflict. So I think we really, and that is an area again, Pelham, that I'm very excited about, is that in our area of industrial psychology, is that we can tap really way more, into the security, because in the end of the day, like Nico said, it's not only tactical, you're really working with a great, scope of people. And if we really can educate, the security industry in how to dealing with people in a given situation, I think, we can take this much more forward.
Well, thanks for that, guys. That's really illuminating. And I say that very specifically to lead me into my first question. As somebody who's, I spent 12 years in the military, and I've been in the private security industry now for more than that time. I'm not going to do the math. But it adds up to a considerable amount of time. And I think it's safe to say that the term industrial psychology is not one that I've heard referenced very much. It's not something that I'm forced to examine or consider, certainly not on a daily basis, if at all. At least not by that phrase and that term. Is there another way, perhaps, as the protector on the ground, that I might better recognize it, another term? And I know, Nico, you mentioned there, you broke it down really well, actually, and said that essentially, it breaks down to, dealing with emotion and things like that. But in terms of it being somebody's responsibility and something we should be watchful for, how would I identify that within a corporate structure? Let's start with.
John, very, very good question. I think we also talk about organizational or behaviorists. One of the things that you talk about is exactly when it comes to the emotional intelligence of people, And also remember, in the old, and you're coming from a military background, I'm coming from an an older background, where we talk about command and control. Command and control is no more there. People can't talk. As soon as somebody talks, yes, I'm still a commander, I'm still in control, then you know where he comes from. Then you understand that he's right, he's everything. So his mind's is in a paradigm, and it didn't move. We call it the agility, that adaptiveness haven't happened. Because when you talk about we're working in a connective world, people need to understand that we're no more in a command control. We're in a managerial situation, we're in a leadership position, meaning that although you're the expert, you also need to acknowledge other people's expertise within the team. And that's where we come into to say to people, you know what, we're not here to go against what we just want to make it better for you and we call it the ABC, the attitude, the behavior, and the conduct. What is your attitude all about? How's your attitude influence your behavior? And that will influence your conduct at the end. So that is the things, John, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so where does the responsibility start for adopting, a more proactive attitude towards this?
I think what is, important, it really starts, with the profession. Yeah. Itself, to add to what Nico has said is that, and I don't want to generalize here, and I must be careful what I'm saying now, is that, but for example, if you have been a victim of crime, and how, for example, sometimes, how can I say, security professionals and so on, or in the safety and security industry treats you, they almost let you feel that you are the person who committed the crime, and that is where psychology, really plays an important role, because still, we go to you, because we expect of you, to protect us, or at least listen to what has happened to us. So I think really, and that is, it starts with the profession. And I think something that's lacking, is again, those standards, that we need to set in terms of conduct. I know in some countries there might be standards, others not. So it's also context specific. But for any given profession, there are some codes and rules and conduct to adhere to. And even though, there are the rules, and so on, which is good, legislation, which is good, we don't go and tap deeper, really into the underlying behavioral manifestations that should come out of it. And that is becoming more and more critical, as we are moving towards more, human-centric organizations and so on. So I think it's really important. But it also starts with us as educators. We need to start, sharing, these type of, how can I say, news, with industry as well. We need to start building more bridges also from our side, that we can work as a collective and overcome that.
Just quickly to add to what Nicolene said, I think when you come to this industry, it's a lot about studying people. So, I mean, where I come from, I did a lot of certain stuff to watch people, studying them. And that's where I think we need to just to be a little bit, how can I say, unlock what psychology, because as soon as the word psychology come in, it's about mad people. And it's not about that. It's the behavior of people, studying the behavior of people. And that's the value add where we can take hands and say, how do we mesh this? Because security is also studying people. It's also watching people and make sum it up and make a conclusion and a comment about, I've seen something happen. My gut tell me there's something going to happen. Where does that gut come from? And we quantify that, where we can work with people and say, psychology is not only, it's also about the mind, and put words to that and give it a context in the behavior of people.
Okay, so I got a two-part question. So first of all, just to paint a picture, and this is purely from your perspective, where are we at as an industry, the security industry? And I know that's very broad, but perhaps when you compare it to other industries like, health and so on, where are we at in terms of, taking this on as a responsibility And assuming that we're not perfect, because it's very rare that we ever are, what is it that's holding us back? Is it budget? Is it an attitude? Is it education?
Yeah. I think you've got it spot on, Ron. I think it's the industry. Remember what happened with and we just talked about it. We inherited. Let's talk about the Roman era. We started this military. We all know the 300, and we all watch the movies. This robust, and it's all about the military background where it comes from. But we need to understand that times change, and it's nothing to do with how perfect we are, because I think the training is good. It's really, really good. It's all about, and the question that we need to ask, it's all about, you just said it very importantly, it's the mindset about the industry. If we really want to say we want to professionalize this industry, what is it that we're going to do better? How are we going to rethink this industry? Not to say that we have to do certain things better, or now we all become psychologists. No, it's to say, okay, what do we mean by professionalization? And it doesn't mean that all of us have now to go to university and study. That's not it. It can be that it's a specific skill set in line with certain knowledge that we need to know. But if you think about the Green Berets, or you think about special forces, it's nothing to go to a university. But in order to qualify, there's a specific rule before you wear the badge. And if you wear the badge, there's a specific persona connected to it. Everybody knows when you wear that badge, wow, this is somebody who's done it. The question is, what has this person done? What has he been through? And that's where we come in to say, okay, you know what? You can still go through those robust things, but where do we take hands and help the industry to become, more open to certain, like I said, because you talk about the industry, we talk about people, and as soon as you talk to us about people and organizations, there's a blend, and there's things that we can help you with.
So it's almost a culture then, I think.
Yeah.
Certainly with your reference to, elite units and special forces, where it's certainly not about budget and about waiting for somebody to command you or tell you to do something, or even, for that an outside agency to come and implement it. It's that you see the value of doing it and you take it upon yourself, because that's your culture of doing that, and you want to improve, and you want to improve the unit, the organization, the industry that you're a part of.
Yeah.
And it's instilling that sense of pride, like in yourself, like you're proud to be, like in the security industry, like because you're a professional, you're good at what you're doing, and I think that's important, and it's becoming more agile, and also, like Nico said, changing our mindsets. We also belong to other, professional industries. And no one is perfect, we all need to grow. And I think that is the message, and we all need to grow to a better, future and a better purpose. And I think really to just realize, wow, and that is why I come in with talent and say, listen, I'm in security, I'm talented, and I'm making a contribution. So, and that is also important part, again, bringing in the psychology, working with that mindset of a person.
Yeah. If I can add to that, you said a very important thing that I want to add to. Think about it, and we continuously use the word, and there's a word that we use, and that word is loaded. The word, I think about black water. What happened? There's a huge thing about that, and that's because there's a word that we use, and that word is a culture word. The word is military. Now, what is the difference between the word military and security, or do we interchange? Do we use it as the same thing? And if we use it as the same thing, we're going to have problems. So that's where we come from, to say, whoa. We need to redefine what is meant with the word security. And if we talk about the word security, what culture would we have try to contribute? If we talk about professionalism and we talk about, a professionalization, what is this culture then? To say, okay, let's move away. Yes, it's a military action, but it's not military per se. So that is the things, John, that we think about when we need to think in a new way. Because yes, we all understand military, we all come, but that's a total different culture. If we think about what's happening in the security industry, and not even to think about cybersecurity, that's nothing to do with military. it's a guy hacking into stuff, and it's total different, aspect. And so, yeah, just to add to what you're saying.
I'm really interested in this because, as you said, industrial psychology has other forms, other names. Organizational psychology, probably related. A lot of people in corporations use it as an HR function, and they look at how to get better job retention, satisfaction, not so much turnover. They're looking at pay levels and happiness and things like that. I'm interested in how you or anyone can get a better handle on, let's say, the EP community or man guards, where they are not sitting in an office. How do you do that research? How do you find out? Did you pull them to one side and say, you've been on deployment to Chad, let's sit down and see how happy you are? How does that work in practice?
I think Pelham, I think this podcast is too short. I think we should have a series on it, because one thing that you talk about is where we come from. Let's go to a industry. Let's say in London, one of the security companies. Let's take Group 4 or whatever. The first thing we're going to talk about. Let's look about the turnaround time for people. What is the turnover of people moving in and out of the organization? If you look at the turnover, it will tell you a story. Why is there so many people coming into the organization, and why is there so many people leaving the organization? Then you're going to talk about the levels. So let's look at entry level, and we're going to quantify what entry level means. Let's look at supervisory level. Let's look at what you're talking about, EP level, where it's very, very specific. What is the people coming in? How many continue with the company? Why is the turnaround of people and the leaving the organization? Is it about health? Is it about wealth? What is it all about? And that's where the questions start to talk about. Because when you talk about your low level, for instance, let's take an international company like ADT, and we say the turnaround is about 70% people come in, then the recruitment, there's something wrong with the recruitment and the training and the strategy of the organization. So those are the things that we're looking all about. Then you go into higher levels, and from the lowest to the higher levels, you talk about the wellness of the organization. Like John have said, we talk about the culture in the organization. Is it the toxic culture? Is it the open culture? What is the growth rate? Is there career pathing in this organization, or is there no career pathing? It's just a money spinning organization where people is just numbers, and the owners and the stakeholders is just making a lot of money. So those are the things, just in a nutshell. I don't know, Nicolene, if you wanted to add.
No, there's very little that I can add. But what's for me important, Pelham, is that I want to have conversations, with people. I want to understand their thinking. I want to understand the environment where they are. And that is for me very important. And also talking about professionalism. Sometimes one would be surprised to find out that people don't always know what does this word mean. To be a professional, what does it mean, within my industry, and for me, it's good to have conversations with people, and try to detect, what's going on. I don't want to wait for people to come to me, for example, as an industrial psychologist. Okay, and that's how I work. I want to go out to the people, and talk to them. And I need, when you say about the different jargons, organizational psychologists and those, I actually wanted to add and say, the only time when we as academics agree about something is to disagree about something. So there are so many jargons and so on out there. But I think that, and John also mentioned that, is that it's something that is not very much known, in the security industry. And I think we're responsible to go out there, and start making ourselves, really visible. Because in the end of the day, we can't operate in silos. We coming from different areas really need to start supporting one another, one way or the other.
And like Nicolene, just to add to what you say, Pelham, I think one of the things is, I think in London, if I remember, is it ISI or somebody that is a regulating body?
SIA.
I think that is where Monet and I had a long discussion, where I then had the discussion with him, and he pulled me, because one of the things that I think they're neglecting is the whole thing of professionalization, because the industry doesn't look after itself. when it comes to professionalization, and to say, okay, what is a professional body need to start? Where do we start, and how do we take, really cognizance about this industry when it comes to our people,
That comment will be popular with quite a lot of our listeners and quite a few contributors to this podcast as well. But yeah, I'm just wondering. So, like, I'm putting myself in my own shoes, I guess, and that of the listeners. So, I'm a EP agent, let's say, and I work for myself. I'm a self-contractor. I pick up a security task here and there, short term. They come, they go, they end. I have a limited amount of budget and time for professional development, but I understand the importance of this message, but I don't know what to do, as a self-employed executive protector. What do you suggest? Where do I turn? Where do I get more information? What can I do on my own, and what resources are there out there?
Yeah, John, this is a very, very critical question. I think very important question. I think we need to take a step back and say, one of the services, I think you talk about, and as soon as you say, I'm looking after myself, you're talking about us as an entrepreneur. So you think about, you're not only a military guy, but you're also a business guy. The question is, who taught you business skills? Who taught you about business? How does an entrepreneur think? And that is the thing when I talk about, where I just talked about, is say there should be more to be provided by the industry, or what you talk about your body. You just mentioned it, the ICE, what did you call it, Pelham? Your security industry regulator.
SIA.
That should be part and parcel of services that I provide to young people, to say, we would like to also give you, not only to regulate you and to make sure that you tick the boxes of compliance. That doesn't mean that you do anything. It's just a tick box. But we can also provide you with certain services or access to certain services. That's why you pay membership fees. Part of this membership fees to belong to this entity should be access to people that can provide you some thoughts on how to position yourself, how to franchise yourself, or how to become an entrepreneur. And then also, like people like us, to work with your teams, to work with you. That's the ideas that we can think about to make it, not affordable, but accessible. Because I don't think it's something that you should pay for. It's something that can be offered to you.
I agree with Nico, because as part, and that's a very good question, John. As part of being part of a profession,
yes,
you are being provided with opportunities, and we call it continuous professional development, CPD points. So if you have a profession, you've got access to that. But I think what's important for me also, and I'm putting my hat on from a higher education institutional perspective, I also think that we are responsible, really for educating people out there, and we need to make ourselves more visible and say, listen, this is what we have to offer to the security industry. And we also need to go out and do a needs analysis, and see really, what are the needs of our people in security there, and see how we can address that. And another thing, what is very important, and a trend, within a work life, I don't know if you heard about the longevity dividend. So what's going to happen is that there's not going to be retirement anymore. So it's going to be very interesting going into the future. You're actually going to have people 100 years and older working side to side. So it brings us with another conundrum in terms of, how are we going to upskill and reskill these individuals? Doesn't matter in which phase, you are. It's a continuous development process. And I think we are at an ideal opportunity now, where we really can start with something really special, within a security industry, and really start making resources available and educate people. And I think also, sorry, Nico, and I think what would be wonderful for me is to tap, John, you've got a lot of experience. And I've just mentioned the community, project. We are not educated in communities, really, the security issues out there. Now imagine, like if we can bring in experts such as yourself with your experience, like and educating people, telling them about, listen, this is what we need to watch out for. So I think it's a vice versa relationship, like we can really jointly support one another.
Yeah. Spellum, just to add to what Nicolene had said, and just another term that we coin, and just what John said. I mean, he's one person. How do he diversify himself? And we talk about and the industry. How do we take that knowledge and we talk knowledge management? How do we standardize? How do we put it somewhere and say, you know what, on a system where people can tap into that knowledge? Because if John is not there, what's going to happen with all that? And I think if John is not the only one, there's a lot of his expertise that get lost in the system. How do we pull it together? How do we put it out there, and how do we triplicate that and say, okay, like train the trainer programs? How do we do that? And we take and say, okay, you know what, we need more Johns out there, we need no more people like that out there, but with a different focus, because we have this expertise. And like Nicolene said, how we take that into the community, say, okay, I mean, for me, in South Africa, we got a lot of farm attacks, for instance. How do we train people that's not military, for instance, housewife, to be aware about specific stuff, just stuff that we don't even, if you come into a house, what to look for, what is an awareness, schools, those people, the first responder. People are not trained in those things. They think it's not going to happen. How do we not take that knowledge? That's what John have said. The culture must come from where we change the term from military to all of us, community service or community safety. How do we take that into another level where we add value to our industry? Say it's not about me making money, but we also contribute to the safety and security of every person in this global community.
Sorry, Nico, just the last thing that I want to add is that, for example, if you have to take a country like South Africa, our unemployment is very, very high. And likewise, our crime is really also high. So I also see the security industry really as a job creator, and as soon as we are starting, creating jobs, and I'm thinking, John, with your entrepreneurial background, there are so many people, who want to work, but who doesn't get the opportunity. So imagine if you can have a situation where you can get more, security, entrepreneurs. There are so many golden opportunities, where you can really have a win-win situation, more educated security, less crime, more employment opportunities. So I think the opportunities really are endless to do something out there.
Yeah.
Very good. We need to think about how to reflect for our EP community. And as John said, it is rather difficult, isn't it? Seeing yourself in a bigger whole. And you might not be in a corporate structure. So where does this apply to you? Perhaps you can see how someone is practicing organizational psychology on you. Maybe you're a piece of the puzzle. Maybe you want to affect change in an organization, but you don't have the corporate language to use that they're using. So, lots of different angles we can go for. And I must reflect again, it is great to see you again. And of course, you were there at the very first Close Protection Technology Forum, where you did bring up organizational psychology even then. So it's not completely out of the ordinary.
No, thanks, Pelham.
Perfect. So from John and myself, this has been a fantastic look at industrial and organizational psychology in the world of security and EP. It's been a pleasure having you, Nico and Nicolene, on, and we're very grateful for having you. This has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast. Well, thank you, Nico and Nicolene, for joining us. It was great to include that, initially tangential area onto the world of EP, but I think we've drawn some great nuggets out of it. John, what did you take away from today's session?
Well, I've got a lot more questions now than when I started. So when we did that intro, I was more or less in the dark, or at least I thought so at the time. I think Nico particularly was able to put some things into perspective for me there. I was, as we were going through that interview, I was reflecting on a few different areas in, my career to date. where I'd either felt like, okay, yeah, I've experienced, this industrial psychology at work, particularly, when Nico was talking about how to deal with your emotions after and during particular events and situations, and then the whole broader subject of talent management. So, yeah, it's informed and it's given me a thirst, and I've got more questions, but in a really good way.
And that's perhaps the testament to a great episode. And, hey, answers on a postcard. Maybe you too have questions. Maybe you would love to engage with Nico and Nicolene. And, industrial psychology is, in fact, very important because lots of people, yes, admittedly, it might go off and do some criminology degree, some, crime psychology degree. And I get that. But you want to build a business. You want to build an effective team. And that's where I believe industrial psychology will come into its own. And hey, a lot of the self-help books that I know our listeners read, because I also watch those inspirational YouTube videos, they are replete with industrial psychology examples. But we don't need to go into that because it's good to leave it with the academics or the pracademics, as Nicolene said. Right. Apart from that, what have we got coming up, John?
Well, we're into the final throes now of putting together this issue of the Circuit magazine. It's always a big event for us, and we're out there beating the drums as always for contributors. Probably not going to make this issue, but we've always got one in the pipeline. So if there's anybody with anything burning on their chest that they want to discuss with our community, then we'd love to hear from you. But also, just as a general awareness campaign, the new issue 64, will be coming out very soon, and there's some really great features in there. Still haven't decided on the cover feature yet, which I know is always something that people look forward to see what's going to be leading the issue for this particular edition.
Yeah, I do look forward to that, and it is even for me exciting because it sets the tone, and sometimes it's really quite provocative, and I like that. I think that's a great way to start each magazine, and hey, we try and be provocative on the podcast. We're bringing the pages of the magazine to life, so I wholeheartedly agree. In the event calendar space, of course, we, the Circuit magazine, have a stand at the CP World Forum on the 12th of the November. So we look forward to seeing you there. Come say hello. I know that Elijah is very active at the CP Forum just ahead of the IPSB in Las Vegas. So that, of course, places that at least I will be, and we look forward to seeing you there. And never too early to put the 8th annual Executive Security Closed Protection Technology Forum, 26th January, on your diary. And as we said, segue to Nico. Nico very kindly spoke at the first one back in 2016. So, I don't know, good segue there, isn't it? Great. So I hope everyone enjoyed today's session. Yes, it's a little bit different to our usual approach, but I think it added a lot. Plus, these are people who have been involved with EP for a long time, so they know why it might fit. It's been great talking to Nico and Nicolene. Great shout out to our South African friends, of course. And it's really, really exciting to see why industrial psychology could apply to you, the protector. So from John and myself, this has been another fantastic edition of the Circuit Magazine podcast.
You have been listening to the Circuit Magazine podcast. Be sure to subscribe and be sure to not miss an episode.